Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's first of all, I'd like to thank the organisers and especially Brother Zain Sharif for inviting me, and I'm very humbled by the large turnout tonight. It's extremely humbling, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this evening one which is a benefit to you. Maybe we'll take the echo away, brother. One that is a benefit to you, because I want to share with you some things which what I'm going to share with you is nothing that I have come up with from my own intelligence or my own creativity. This is things which are based on really the basics of psychology, which any individual who would like to study can have access to. But inshallah, what I want to do is give you the information in a way which you can take it on board and start to apply it practically in your life. So I'm talking to, of course, the mothers in the audience, the young ladies, I'm talking to the fathers, I'm talking to the teenagers, and even to the youngsters. They will be, inshallah, be able to benefit tonight. So the title of my talk is Family Function and Dysfunction. If we could go to the first slide, brother. So when we as a community think about intelligence, the cognitive capacity, we often think about mathematics, physics, biology, English. We have a very limited, narrow view of intelligence. It's an academic intelligence, getting good marks at school, getting distinctions, high distinctions, maybe getting into medicine, becoming a lawyer. But in fact, if you look at it Islamically, that intelligence is not limited to academics, and there is something which we may broadly call emotional intelligence, which I've put up there, which is an awareness of one's emotions, an awareness of how an individual relates to another individual, an awareness of one's internal sense of self and their identity. And I'm sure we've all met people who are very academically intelligent, but you find there's something lacking, that emotional connection, maybe that wisdom, because wisdom, hikmah, is different from book knowledge, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Islam wants us to be complete people, not people that are put in boxes, engineer, lawyer, physicist, high IQ, low IQ. Life is much more than that. Next slide, please. First point. So as Muslim families, we're very aware of the need for our children to perform well at school. We send them to school, we make sure they do their homework, we have aspirations for them, for their careers. Maybe just go through the whole thing, brother. Put them down. And we often in our society have a desire for our children to become professionals, especially doctors, lawyers, engineers, something to make the parents proud. Is that right? We have that desire for our kids. But unfortunately, often with this desire comes a neglect of the emotional and psychological needs of the child. Because life is like a mathematical equation, a balance sheet. If you make changes on one side, there's an effect on the other side. So if we put too much emphasis on just academics and learning, book knowledge, there are other factors which we may be not focusing on. And such neglect isn't of no consequence. It actually has an impact on their faith, and it can have a lifelong impact on their well-being, as I will explain. Furthermore, these impacts can be cross-generational. So you may find that an individual has got some psychological problem, some sort of mental health problem, and when you study their history, you might find that their problem originated a few generations back with some wrong choices or maladaptive behaviors or attitudes that were developed and that have been transmitted across the generations. We talk in psychology about the transmission of trauma and dysfunction across generations. Learned behaviors which keep going through. Next slide, please. So, why is child psychology important in Islam? Why is it important for Muslims to understand something of the psychology of a child? What do I mean by child psychology? Meaning to understand the internal mental lives and experiences of children, that they are different from adults. You can't treat a child like a mini adult. It will harm the child. You as a parent need to have some basic understanding of how a child operates at a psychological mental level and recognize that it's not the same as an adult. My first point there is that the relationship a child has with his parents can mirror the relationship he will have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do I mean? By the way, is it clear how I'm talking and the volume is okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If you think about it, imagine a child who has a dysfunctional childhood. Their relationship with their parent is mixed with a lot of toxic emotions and anger. Maybe there's very harsh physical punishment. And in general, the childhood is not a happy one. Do you think that these experiences might affect that child's faith, their iman as they grow up? Yes or no? Yes? Why yes? Why would those experiences in childhood? Because you might say, no, it has no effect. The Quran is there, the imams are there, if he wants guidance, he can get it, which is true. But are we saying, may it have a negative influence if the childhood was dysfunctional, was traumatic? Of course, yes. Why? If you think about it, a child is dependent upon the parents. In what way? The parent acts as a container for the child. This is in an ideal sense. If the parent is themselves emotionally well adjusted, a child will express anger, will express jealousy. A child may even express hatred because he's a child. And if you and me as parents, we can help the child process their emotions and act as a mirror and not ourselves become shaken or upset by what the child gives us, then we act as a container. Whatever the child gives, they have the confidence that mum and dad can contain whatever emotions we bring. You following me? Isn't that what we seek from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That He can contain everything we bring to Him, all our problems, all our calamities, all our tragedies, we turn to Allah. He is our container. So the role of a parent to a child is analogous to the role of the Creator with His creation. I'm not saying that we are gods and stuff, but I'm drawing an analogy that be careful. So what we're talking about here, we're not talking about Lebanese children or Pakistani children or Afghan children, we're talking about all children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created all of us with fundamental needs. These are not options. These aren't optional extras. You know, when you buy a car, you can get, what is it, most cars these days have power steering, right? That's not an optional. Power windows, immobilizer, it's optional. These are non-negotiable. A child needs the things I'm going to talk about. Next slide. Now, as I said, this isn't something from my own learning or knowledge, and this, I'm not seeking here to apply Western psychology to Muslims. What I'm talking today is Islam, but I'm putting it in a vocabulary which we can say is psychological. So let's look at some ahadith from the Blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Blessed Imam. The Prophet of Islam said the right of a child over his parent is that he should give him a good name, make his manners good, and teach him the Quran. So our children, they have rights over us. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, surely the heart of a child is like fallow ground. Whatever is planted in it is accepted by it. The child is like a sponge. You can mold them. And if you're not careful, if the information or the experiences they have early on are negative, that will create an imprint upon the mind, upon the psyche, which at times can be long-lasting, lifelong. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi once in the Dhuhr noon prayer shortened the last 2 rak'ah. And when the people inquired about the reason, Ya Rasulullah, why did you shorten the prayers? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi replied, didn't you hear the child crying? There was an infant crying. Now if you think about it, the man who is put in charge of the universe, the Rahmah to the Alameen, he shortens the prayers because a baby is crying. You can't get any more merciful than that. Yet at times, unfortunately, in our own lives, we may relate to our children in a way which does not do them this sort of justice. Because the Prophet of Allah is our role model. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Indeed, you have in the Messenger of Allah the best example. The Prophet ﷺ said, one who has a child should act like the child. If you have a child, you need, not that you become a child, but you need to understand the child. If you are relating to him as an adult, you're not going to do the right job. Next slide.